HighBridge, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Colony, Faith and Blood in a Promised Land by Sally Denton, read by Richardson. Prologue. She was the whitest. On the morning of their murders, the three young mothers felt uncommonly apprehensive as they prepared to leave the village of La Mora in northern Mexico. Their sport utility vehicles were packed for the 6-hour journey, which would include a desolate 12-mile stretch on a dirt road dividing the states of Sonora and Chihuahua. Each woman had made the trek dozens of times between the sister communities of La Mora and Colonia LeBaron. They were well aware that the isolated and unpatrolled road was also the regular route for Mexico's criminal cartels to transport drugs into the U.S. But because their interrelated families, who had dual American and Mexican citizenship, had lived in the area for more than a century and were well known by the cartels, they believed that they were protected from the violence of the drug trade. The lonely road was rarely used by local farmers and ranchers. Outside of the cartels, it was almost exclusively traveled by La Mora and LeBaron family members, for whom it was a shortcut through the mountains. Sometimes they get the warning that it is better not to use it. Bullets are predicted, a family member said, referring to communications between the cartels and La Mora and LeBaron. In the weeks prior to the attacks, the victims had been alerted repeatedly not to travel the road, but for some reason they had neglected to take the threats seriously. Each of the three women had an intuition that something was wrong, but they forged ahead, perhaps even knowing they were tempting fate. On November 4th, 2019, they departed in their 3 SUV caravan, figuring there would be safety in numbers. Each of the women was married, and they were taking with them a total of 14 children, between the ages of 7 months and 14 years old. By all accounts, the caravan was unarmed. 30-year-old Ronita LeBaron Miller was traveling with 4 of her 7 children. She placed Titus and Tiana, her 8-month-old twins, in their car seats. Howie and Crystal, 12 and 10 respectively, were strapped in with their seat belts, excited about going on a road trip with their mom and helping her with the babies. Ronita, or Nita as her family called her, planned to drive part way with the other 2 women and then veer off northwest toward Phoenix. Her husband, Howard Miller, was flying in that afternoon to Sky Harbor Airport from North Dakota, where the couple had been living for most of their 13-year marriage. Ever since Howard's brother had died several months earlier in an ultralight aircraft crash, Howard and Ronita had begun spending more time in La Mora to help in his parents' pecan orchards. Described by one account as a typical American mom, the blue-eyed blonde had a Pinterest page and frequently posted family photographs on Facebook and Instagram. Known for her sense of style, Ronita wore diamond stud earrings, willowy sundresses, and fashionable hats to protect her fair skin. A spunky lass, as one of her aunts described her, she had an infectious smile and relentless energy and could charm everyone. Just 6 weeks earlier, she and her husband had decided to leave the U.S. permanently. Howard had been working with some of his brothers in a fracking business in North Dakota and resettle in their native Mexico. Howard had been reared on his father's large farm at La Mora in the municipality of Bavispe in the state of Sonora. Ronita had grown up across the Sierra Madre mountain range in the village of LeBaron in the municipality of Galeana in the state of Chihuahua. At 16, she married Howard, her handsome 17-year-old second cousin, and now they were building their dream home on a hill overlooking LeBaron, where they would raise their growing family. Ronita and Howard expected to spend a few days in Phoenix, enjoying the city and shopping for a wedding gift for Howard's sister, before returning to Mexico to begin the new phase in their lives. 31-year-old Christina Langford Johnson was traveling from La Mora to LeBaron with her 7-month-old infant, Faith. Born in La Mora, Christina was the common-law wife of a native of LeBaron, a cousin of Ronita's named Tyler Johnson, and had been raising their 6 kids in La Mora, while Tyler, like Howard Miller, lived and worked in North Dakota. She had recently decided to join Tyler and the large community of La Mora and LeBaron relatives living in and around Williston, North Dakota. Though she loved raising their children in La Mora, in the country surrounded by high-definition views of uninterrupted landscape, as one journalist put it, they missed living together. That weekend, her family had held a going-away party for her in the home where she had grown up. The next day, she was heading to LeBaron, where she and Tyler would begin the process of moving their family to the U.S. A lively brunette with warm chocolate eyes, Christina was a gifted pianist and composer. Her late father, Dan Langford, had been the founder of La Mora, and Christina was a fireball who had her dad's temper, according to her mother. She reacted instantly to everything. She could fight with somebody, but then a minute later she was completely repentant and fixing it. Determined and focused, Christina was very disciplined, and yet she was sunshine, said her mother. Every time you see her, she had a smile. 43-year-old Donna Ray Langford would drive the 3rd SUV in the convoy. The oldest of 49 children, Donna was like a second mother to her younger siblings, and was beloved by the many sisters and mothers she supported as they reared their own large broods. Fun-loving and mischievous, she was known as Aunt Donna to dozens in the La Mora community who frequently sought her open smile and sage advice. Donna could take mundane happenings and turn them into stories with a moral, according to one relative, even if it might mean exaggerating or bending the facts of that story a tad. The plural wife of David Langford, Donna was looking forward to celebrating their 25th anniversary a week later. She was taking 9 of her 13 children, ranging in age from 9 months to 14 years, to LeBaron to attend a wedding and have playtime with their many cousins. Ronita, Christina, and Donna were all raised in polygamous families, model people, a close relative said, God-fearing women committed to rearing good children. They were related by blood and marriage and had just celebrated together in La Mora to wish Christina Godspeed in her new life in North Dakota. On the morning of November 4th, a Monday, the 3 assembled at the home of Christina's mother, Amelia Langford, to load their Chevrolet Suburbans. They packed snacks and toys and puzzles for the children, milk bottles for the babies, and in Ronita's case, infant seats for the twins, as well as strollers and overnight bags for her visit to Phoenix with Howard. We were at my house and everyone left at the farm gathered to say goodbye, Amelia would later tell a BBC reporter. We talked about it, about how stupid we are as women, traveling these roads alone and with our kids. Christina had laughed, her mother remembered, and said, I'm not afraid of anything. Though she then added, I am a little bit, but why should I be? There's a bunch of us going together. I won't be alone. The women traded tales about the sicarios, the cartel's hired killers who manned the checkpoints between the 2 Mexican states. We'd been a little more nervous the last couple of months, Ronita's sister-in-law would remember, but we still felt like we were okay. Ronita was as knowledgeable as anyone about the intensifying violence in the region, But she was naively optimistic about her trip and her immunity from it. She had been born and raised in LeBaron. Her mother, Bathsheba Shalom, known as Shalom, was one of her father's 4 plural wives. The 6th of Shalom's 12 children, Ronita had bounced back and forth across the Sierra Madre Range her entire life. She thought her innocence would protect her, said her sister, Adriana. Who's going to mess with a woman and her kids? Nobody is that evil. Still, Ronita paused before leaving La Mora that morning. I have a bad feeling about this, she told her mother-in-law, Loretta Miller, who later said they had all talked about security concerns the previous night. Maybe I shouldn't go. Then she slid into the front seat of her SUV. Under a clear sky, the 17 women and children struck out across the high desert. But just 5 miles outside of La Mora, a ball bearing on the front passenger wheel failed on Ronita's black SUV. They couldn't call for help because cell service was out for some unknown reason, so Ronita and her 4 children crowded into the other 2 vehicles and headed back to her in-laws' house for a replacement vehicle. Do you think it's a sign? Ronita asked Loretta when they arrived back in La Mora. Well, you decide, Loretta said, but if you want to borrow my car, you're welcome to. It was already after 9 a.m., and Christina and Donna, eager to get back on the road after the delay, headed out again while Ronita put her kids in Loretta's Chevy Tahoe and followed behind them. When Ronita arrived back at the broken-down Suburban, she transferred the car seats and luggage into the Tahoe, while the other 2 women continued on. Ronita then rushed to catch up. Not far behind her was her 18-year-old brother-in-law, Andre Miller, who was bringing a trailer to tow the disabled Suburban back to La Mora. It was 10:20 a.m. when Andre reached the Suburban and saw a column of black smoke about a mile up the road, and then a fireball exploding upward. Fearing that Ronita had been in an accident, Andre raced to the scene. He found the Tahoe engulfed in flames, the inferno so intense that he couldn't get closer than 30 feet to see whether anyone was inside. He was only able to identify the SUV by its license plate. He saw 6 men dressed in black and carrying automatic weapons, and they sped away in what looked like brand-new SUVs. Andre then spotted another 3 black-clad men wearing military helmets, walking away from him on the road toward Chihuahua. I couldn't tell if they were inside the car or not, Andre recalled, referring to Ronita and her children. He wondered at first whether they had been kidnapped. He hurried back to his parents' house in La Mora, yelling that there had been an attack on Ronita's car and that he didn't know what had happened to her and the children. A family member sent up a drone to check the area, and once they saw that it was clear, several of the men in the Mormon community gathered, forming a posse. Uncertain about what they would find and fearful that the armed gunmen Andre had seen were still in the area, they joined members of the nearby Sonora cartel, who were also assembling to investigate the attack. The La Mora community had long coexisted with the cartel that controlled Sonora, an offshoot of Joaquin El Chapo Guzman's powerful Sinaloa cartel, purchasing gasoline from them while giving them a wide berth. In an arrangement more forced than agreed upon, the 2 sides maintained a largely peaceful, if uncomfortable, arrangement. The previous year, one of the violent cells of the Sinaloa-Sonora cartel had ordered the Mormons not to purchase gasoline from anyone but them, even though it was cheaper in the neighboring state of Chihuahua. In return, they promised to warn the community when there might be violence. The cartel members had heard the explosion and immediately suspected that their rival, La Línea, The enforcement wing of the Juarez cartel in Chihuahua had encroached onto their territory. Sonora foot soldiers, 50 or 60 of them armed to the teeth, loaded into a convoy of 6 hard trucks, Tritons with blacked-out windows, and raced off toward the site of the ambush, with the Mormon men following. The family stopped at the still smoldering Tahoe while the cartel men continued up the road to confront the attackers. Kenneth Miller, Ronita's father-in-law, was the first to look inside the incinerated car. He recorded a cell phone video, choking up in anguish. "This is for the record. Nita and 4 of my grandchildren are burnt and shot up," he cried. The video would go viral as family members posted it to Facebook, WhatsApp, and Twitter in urgent pleas for help. They were still unable to get cell service, so they used portable Wi-Fi devices and satellite phones. "Howie's wife and 4 kids have been killed," read a WhatsApp message that appeared on the family thread just after noon. "Christina and Donna are not accounted for. We're traveling with them." Kenny LeBaron, then 32, who owns a trucking company in Williston, recalled that the messages are hard to listen to, but you get the whole story from them. "They shot the shit out of my grandchildren, my daughter's daughter-in-law, just burned them to a crisp," said a family member in a voice message shared among relatives in Mexico and the U.S. "There's nothing left, just a few bones." Ronita's sister-in-law would later describe the horror to NBC News. "It was awful, seeing the babies' little skulls just sitting there on the floor of the car, burnt and broken." Another relative recounted the grisly attack on the Chevy Tahoe. "They just unleashed hell on this vehicle, fired shots, raided them, and burned the passengers alive. The front passenger door was open, and the ashen remains of 12-year-old Howie were falling half out of the vehicle, as though he had been trying to escape. The twins' car seats were belted in the second row, and Crystal's burned body was in a fetal position in the SUV's third row, tightly holding on to a tiny pink leather purse." Relatives of Christina and Donna began to panic, as neither woman had been heard from since they left La Mora 2 hours earlier. Family members frantically called the U.S. Embassy, the Mexican Federal Police, the Attorneys General of both Sonora and Chihuahua, and the Mexican military, begging for help to rescue the other 2 women and 10 children, thought to be a short distance farther along the road from where Ronita was attacked. It turned out that they were 11 miles away, a confusing fact that defeated the security purpose of traveling as a caravan, though it probably had little effect on the tragic results. Christina had been in the lead as the road narrowed and began its steep incline, with a sheer mountain face to the left and a vertical drop-off to the right. "The location seemed chosen for its vulnerability," observed one of the first reporters to arrive at the scene days later. "An attack could not easily be defended or escaped. As the women barreled up the road, their vehicles were easy targets." Sometime after 11 a.m., more than 40 minutes after the attack on Ronita, gunmen opened fire on Christina's Suburban. She quickly placed Faith, who was in a car seat, on the floor behind her, threw a blanket over the baby, and jumped out, waving her hands in the air, begging for mercy, and showing she was alone and unarmed. "We're women!" she shouted. But the assailants kept shooting, and she was fatally wounded in the heart. A few minutes later, when Donna came upon Christina's body in the road, she started yelling at her 9 children to drop to the floor and hide the babies. "Get down, right now!" she screamed, while also praying to the Lord and trying to start the car up to get out of there, her 13-year-old son Devin later recalled. Bullets rained from a nearby hilltop, killing Donna along with her 11-year-old and 2-year-old sons. A late-model red pickup truck drove up to Donna's Suburban, and the driver told the surviving 7 kids to run. Nearly all of them, including a toddler and an infant, were bleeding from gunshot wounds. Although the driver of the truck spoke Spanish, Devon, who was uninjured, understood what they were being told to do. They got us out of the car and then they drove off. One of Devon's sisters later said that the driver was checking to make sure the women were dead and was surprised to find the vehicle full of children. Devon gathered his 6 siblings and began the trek back toward La Mora, but they had walked less than 1,000 feet before he realized they were too injured to make it. 14-year-old Kylie could barely walk with her foot wound. A bullet had grazed 9-year-old Mackenzie's arm, and 8-year-old Cody had been shot in the jaw. 6-year-old Jake was uninjured but not able to walk a long distance. Xander, 4, had been shot in the back, and 9-month-old Brixton, who had an open flesh wound in the chest and a bullet graze on his wrist, was carried by one of his siblings. Going through my mind was to get help because my siblings were bleeding really bad, so I was in a rush to get there, Devon would recall. He knew he had to hide them and continue alone on the long 14-mile journey home. In a ravine off the side of the road, he found a tree with low-hanging limbs and secreted the children under it, covering them with branches and begging them to be silent while he went for help. For hours, the children heard gunfire in the distance. By mid-afternoon, word had reached Shalom and Adrian LeBaron Soto, Ronita's mother and father, who were running errands together in Galeana, that Ronita's car had been ambushed. La Mora and LeBaron are approximately 100 miles apart as the crow flies, but because of the rugged terrain and the single-lane road, the drive between the two can take as long as 7 hours. Departing from La Mora, the route first goes north and then doubles back south toward LeBaron, following the spine of the mountain range. Joel LeBaron Soto, Ronita's uncle and the family patriarch, along with his adult son Julian, organized a group on the Chihuahua side of the Sierra Madre to intercept and rescue anyone who might still be alive from the other 2 vehicles. Julian notified the Mexican National Guard in Chihuahua and asked them to protect the LeBaron family property from attack while they headed to the neighboring state of Sonora. Shalom and Adrian joined the caravan of about a dozen people. But when they left Highway 10 at the small town of Janos to travel the 40 miles of dirt road to the Sonoran border, soldiers stopped them, warning that rival cartels were battling in the nearby foothills, and the situation was too dangerous for them to proceed. Donna's 6 terrified children huddled together as the hours passed and the temperature dropped. Mackenzie finally decided that Devon had been gone too long and that she needed to go find him. She left her 5 siblings under the tree and took off walking toward La Mora, in spite of the bullet wound in her arm. But she became lost in the labyrinth of dirt roads and took off one of her shoes to fight back a snake, leaving her with a bare foot that was soon scratched and bloody from the rugged terrain. Devon had traveled as fast as he could, hiding when he thought he was being followed, and praying every step of the way. At 5:30 p.m., 6 hours after the ambush of his mother's car, the exhausted boy came across the search party, the armed posse of men who had set off from La Mora earlier in the day, and he gave them the first report of the deaths of Christina, Donna, and 2 of his brothers. He said the shooters carried long guns and wore masks. He related that Christina had gotten out of the car and waved her arms, but the gunmen shot her anyway. "We have to go back! We have to rescue them!" Devon shouted, referring to his brothers and sisters. His armed uncles immediately headed out to find the hidden children, now knowing that most of them were seriously injured. At about the same time, the LeBaron caravan that had been stopped by the military in the small village of Pancho Villa, southwest of Janos in Chihuahua, was moving down the dirt road toward the Sonoran border, accompanied by federal police. As family members approached the two massacre sites from both La Mora and LeBaron, a military garrison from Agua Prieta, 70 miles north of La Mora on the Arizona border, joined them. For 11 hours, frightened people from both communities scoured the rough landscape in search of the children, whether dead or alive. Shortly after 7 p.m., the caravan from LeBaron descended the Sonora side of the mountain range, beating local authorities to Christina's and Donna's bullet-riddled Suburbans. They found Christina's body on her back 50 feet from her vehicle, wearing a t-shirt and jeans. The first person that came across the bodies, the crime scene, was me, Julian later told a reporter, incredulous and outraged that no Mexican authorities had arrived to investigate by that point. "She was shot with her hands in the air," Shalom LeBaron echoed Julian's anger. "We'd never dreamed that we'd see Christina's body still lying in the road." The group's despair turned to unfathomable joy when they opened the car door and found baby Faith, blood-spattered but unscathed except for a scrape from shrapnel on her head. Still strapped into her car seat, a bullet hole in its base, the baby was soaked in urine and was in shock. "She opened her eyes like, 'What's up?'" Julian recalled. It was a miracle, they all agreed. "When we found out the baby was alive, it was just a whole new level of rejoicing," said her grandmother Amelia. "It was a relief." The starving and dehydrated infant cried through the entire evening as Shalom gave her capfuls of Pedialyte she found in Christina's car, while others in the party continued toward Donna's nearby Suburban. Donna's body was slumped over the steering wheel, so full of bullets they stopped counting, said one family member. The bodies of 2 of her young sons were also in the car. Around the same time, the group from La Mora arrived at the nearby spot where Donna's surviving and severely injured children, except for Mackenzie, were hiding. Devon had guided the group. Cold, hungry, hurting, and scared, the children were desperate for medical attention and nourishment. The emotional scene then became hysterical when the rescuers realized Mackenzie was missing. As darkness fell, a desperate search ensued. Finally, almost 2 hours later, Kenneth Miller and some soldiers who had escorted the La Mora group found her by tracking her footprints, which alternated between a bare left foot and a right running shoe. The 9-year-old had walked on rocky ground and through brambles for nearly 10 miles, often in the wrong direction, bloodied by her gunshot wound and shoeless foot. When they found her alive on the side of the road, the men wept with gratitude. Another miracle. Back at the site of the attack on Christina's SUV, Shalom had gotten Faith hydrated enough to make tears, and the men took charge of transporting the baby to La Mora, where Amelia would find a nursing mother in the community to feed her. "When they brought her to us, she was very weak," Amelia told a reporter. "They tried to give her a bottle, but she wouldn't really drink it. But after nursing, she greeted everyone with a smile and was happy to be with people again." With the rescued children being taken by ambulance to the medical clinic in Bavispe, Shalom and Adrian planned to drive the 11 miles to Ronita's car. But it was now dark, so the couple continued on to La Mora, returning before dawn the next morning to the site of their daughter's murder. They were stunned that more than 18 hours after their daughter and 4 grandchildren had been shot at close range and set on fire, Mexican law enforcement still had not begun to investigate the crime scene.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?